There we go. Right, good. Welcome to lesson 8. As you know, we've been looking at perspective over the last 7 weeks, and we've been looking at atmospheric perspective. We're going to continue today's class we've looked at other artists and how other artists produce work, and then we've tried out working from a photograph and maybe bringing in some of the ideas that we've learned over this course, including mark making and using colours, softening the background, making the foreground a bit sharper and more vivid with colours and so forth to get atmospheric as well as lineal perspective. What I talked about before was the possibility of working onto a canvas. So at class today, some people said, "Oh, I've had this canvas on the top of a shelf for 20 years and I've decided to bring it in, and we've got some really whoppers. We've got some really big canvases, not so you can't carry them, but big enough." So we're going to have a look at working on to canvas today. The basic difference being that canvas is either stretched cotton or linen over the surface over the edges of the frame. Makes it quite light and flexible to use, and it's quite traditional as well. And I was just saying a few minutes ago how canvas has stood the test of time as far as keeping the quality of the image alive over many years. So it's a lovely material to work on. You can also, a lot of canvases today come with, they're already primed with a gesso, which is basically a covering to take away the colour, and also gesso, which is like a white paint, thick gloopy white paint can take away the texture of a canvas as well. So if you don't want that kind of woven texture on your work, you can do that. You can paint the surface of it. But the other thing is that it's so flexible, you can do different things with it. So I've started to do my usual tricks of collaging into the work to create texture, and you can also use impasto with a palette knife and so forth as well. So it's quite nice to work on these things. And one of the reasons I decided to do it was I suspected a lot of people have canvases at home that they've not used, me being one of them. So I found a canvas at home for us to use today. So we'll have a quick look at what we've got on the wall. I've got a few examples of artists to look at. You'll remember all of these last week, and I've talked a little bit about how some of the techniques that you use can be done with palette knives to create lots of different textures and things like that, and you can scratch back into the paint, you can scrape the paint onto the surface, you can do blending, which you can see in the background there. So there's lots of fun things you can do with the acrylic paints to help you create the textures and the marks for atmospheric perspective and so on. Which is good fun. And then the one with the town hall, let's see if I can bring that one up over here. So the one with the town hall here, I applied tissue paper onto the surface and other various materials before applying paint on the top. So went through that last week and showed a few techniques for you to try out perhaps in your own work, and then use some of those on the painting that I did last week as well. So I've got a few paintings here that I picked off the internet that are quite good for atmospheric perspective and so on. So I'm going to bring some of those up just so you can have a quick look at those. They're not on the drive, these are ones I've chosen just this evening, so I'm just going to put those on the screen so you can have a look. So we've got this painting. The reason I've chosen these pictures in particular is because they're in a bar, and there's plenty of really beautiful artworks that show a bar in a city, for example. I've chosen a man sitting in a bar in, I don't know, the 50s or something like that. But the interesting thing about this work, again with the atmospheric perspective or mark making and paintbrush work is that you can see how sharp she is, and even the highlights on the taps in the bar have been highlighted quite specifically, and her face, to draw your attention in there. But if we look down at the condiments, so if you like, all the bottles and things, you see how softly they're painted, and the background's painted quite softly. So you can really draw the attention to a specific area of your picture by using some of the atmospheric perspective techniques we've been using. So we've got soft brush strokes in the background, and more specific and finer marks or painting in the foreground where the character is, where the person is. And here's another example of atmospheric perspective again. So I'll just get us to have a quick look at that one. So again, look at how these have been painted almost, you might say, very loosely, even the figures towards the back in the bar there, and then a little bit more strength and a changing colour in the foreground helps us to differentiate the different areas within the picture as well. So these kind of things can give us some clues and ideas about how we can tackle quite complex subjects by really just painting with slightly different techniques in different spaces. And then the other one that I got was, I think it's here. I don't know if it is now, actually. Oh, there's one, and I got more than I suspected, actually. So we've got one here by Manet. I'm just going to move it up to the top. So these sorts of pictures are quite traditional, been painted many years, so you'll know this. Van Gogh painted similar things in restaurants and bars and all that sort of thing. So again, we've got you can see the dancers up in the back there on the stage, quite softly painted, and then the chap and the beer and the girl painted much more clearly as well. So I just thought I'd show you that one, and one last one before I stop and we go over to the screen here. Was let's have a look. I'll see if I can do this one. Shut the others off for a minute. There we go. Oh, there, two. So there's another couple of ones here. Again, the one over there on the right is you can see that everything is very loosely painted, very expressive, and it gives a sense of movement and the dynamism in a kitchen. But the chef there in the center has been painted much more clearly and specifically, as has the waiter on the other side of the screen there. You can see he's very clearly painted, but towards the back we've got the softer marks again. So breaking down these spaces in order to make things stand out is what we're all about today. So I hope that gives you an idea of what I'm aiming for today. Obviously everybody's working on slightly different things at the moment, so please continue doing those. And what we'll do then is you can, if you're ready to do that, you can move on to a canvas. Oh, here's Brian. There we go. Right. Okay. So we'll go over to the small screen where I'm small over here. This is the picture that I've chosen just here to work on. Now, one thing to be aware of if you've got a canvas is canvases usually, unless you make your own, they will come in specific shapes and sizes. So my canvas is actually a square shape. So I decided to crop my picture in order to make it into a square shape and be a bit more selective about the composition that I was going to use. So I'm going to try and crop this on the screen. See if I can do that. There we go. So I think it's about here that I went for, and something like that is there. So I've got my shape for my idea that I'm going to paint tonight. Now, one of the things that you can do, a lot of my pictures that I put on the website there or on the drive are all in black and white. So the idea or thinking behind that is that and it's a bit similar to the one that I did last week, is that you work mostly to begin with in a limited colour palette, which we often do. and then you start to introduce the other colours into the picture that you want to include. So if I just shrink him down a little bit and bring you over the one that I did last week, and you remember I did a biro drawing of this, and then I worked back over the top. I'm not going to do biro tonight, I'm just going to go for paint and things. So I'll just bring us in a bit more. So you remember me working on this, and I had a lot of fun because we talked about colour as well, and how and somebody said, how can you change the mood in a picture using the colour? So this one obviously looked quite moody and everything like that, and like thoughtful. Maybe that chap looks a bit thoughtful in there as well. So and then we talked about how do you brighten it up. So I brightened up the colours here by applying some yellows and some purples, which are contrasting colours, or they're opposite on the colour wheel, so they kind of stand out next to each other. But it just changes the mood or the focus in the picture a little bit, because see, you can see the yellow draws us in to the centre there. And I was also taking some ideas loosely anyway from when we looked at artist work, so looking at some of the bolder brush strokes in here applied towards the back, but obviously with my own twist and everything like that. All right, so here's my canvas. Just get it just over here. There's my canvas, how big it is. It's there, and earlier on today I got started with drawing it out and painting it. Now, if you are going to do if you are going to work on the canvas, then what I suggest you do is don't forget to crop it so that it's the same proportions. So that might involve a bit of measuring and things like that. If you've got an A4 canvas, for example, you try and get it as close as you can to the size. The alternative is, if it kind of fits but there's some edges or on different sides, you can maybe extend some of the drawing onto the bits that would be empty if you hadn't cropped it, for example. Now if you want a background color on your whole picture, then on a canvas, then do that first, because what you'll find if you don't do it first and you paint over your pencil lines is that they may get brushed off. So the graphite kind of sits on the surface of the canvas, and if you brush over with wet paint, it can remove the pencil marks. So be aware of that as well as you're working. And then the undercoat should be like a mid-tone. I've just gone for a little bit of a violet colour today because I just fancied the violet, and then I've been working mostly with blues. So I've got a violet colour, and I've got ultramarine and white and a few other bits and bobs, a little bit of burnt umber just to sort of darken the colours down. And I'm going to work on this figure, and then I'm going to loosely work in the background. And I could possibly think about doing the old palette knife scraping on the surface that we did last week. So literally pulling the paint over the surface to build it up. And the last thing I want to show you is you could also think about building up some textures on the surface. If you've got some odd bits of paper around that have got a texture on or that are soft, you get a lot of this sort of tissue paper in packaging, and a little bit of PVA paint helps to sort of obviously stick it. So if I just put some down on this side, I can create some texture. And you may, I mean, I'm doing it in the background here, but you may want more texture towards the foreground to draw attention to that area, or on your figure, for example, on the hat maybe, or on his clothing. You could put some texture in. So I'm just going to put that tissue paper down. I'll zoom in a little bit. You can see what I've done previously just there. So here's my tissue paper, and if I scrunch it and push it down, I can create this texture. And then when I paint over that, because it's tissue, a lot of the colour will soak into or sit on the surface, depending on how thick it is, of the picture or of the tissue, to create something a little bit more interesting and thicker. All right, so I shall be making this figure a bit more crisp in the foreground than in the background, and in the background I'm going to go much more loose with the mark making and so forth, to create that difference that we talked about just a few minutes ago on the other screen. All right, so that's the plan this evening. So, oh gosh, I hope everybody has got what they need. If you don't, or if you want some help, then that's what Mr. Poole, me, is here for. I can help you by having a look at how your work's getting along and everything. So I spend the first part of this evening just working in very, very quickly and loosely into the picture. My aim being really is to get as much done, or to cover a lot of the canvas in the time that we've got in the evening. So I do work really rapidly on here. I do a little bit of refining on the face and things, but I'm going to come back and work back into it probably next week as well. One thing I really wanted to get to too is to start working on the background with these much more sort of blurred and looser marks that I mentioned, a little bit like on some of the paintings that we've seen earlier as well. So a little bit of experimentation and exploration, and I often find that if you work nice and quickly on something, it forces you to look a lot more, and I think I've said that before as well. So I try not to dwell too much on the detail whilst creating, for example, this jacket and the hand and everything, but occasionally I slow myself down so that I can have a closer look and really concentrate on things. So the shapes of the jacket and everything else gets gradually changed and refined as I go along, so the shapes become a little bit more hopefully closer to the photograph that I'm working on, in order to get this the folds in the jacket, trying to get the hand a little bit closer to the correct shape and so forth. And then I use a lot of brown on here for some reason, but I do, you'll see I go back into it quite a lot with the violet colour and the blues and things as we progress. So I'm not worrying overly about anything particularly. I'm just trying to force myself to look as closely as I can at all of the different shapes, you know, the dark shadows on the jacket and so forth, just so that I can start to explore the tones and shadows and the folds in the jacket, as I mentioned before. So very, very loosely and fast working. And I was thinking about this while I was working. In the past, when I've done paintings and I've worked really vigorously and quickly and experimented as I've gone along, I found that I get into this flow where you're kind of in another zone, if you like, looking at the different elements of the picture and so forth. So things start to emerge, you know, because you're kind of loosened up and everything, and you're as I said, in the zone and so forth. One thing that really helped with the shape of the jacket as well is looking at the negative shapes around this chap leaning on the bar as well. So occasionally you're going to see me putting in little bits of white around the outside of the jacket. And that's me looking at the shape of the man a little bit more closely. One thing I'll say as well is I'm working on a flat surface, as I usually do, to enable us to film
what I'm doing. It's very useful, especially if you've got a larger canvas, to put it up on an easel so that you can stand back and look at the shapes from a distance, and also laying something flat. And this is quite a small canvas actually, so I can actually get nicely above it, and I was very tempted to stand up at different times, but I stayed seated anyway. But when something is flat on the table or on the surface you're working on, especially if it's large, your view of whatever you're looking at is going to be distorted. Just like in perspective, things get distorted. They're not facing you directly because they're actually moving away, as in lineal perspective that we've looked at. So it's important to be able to look straight on at your painting. Or at least to stand it up and stand away from it for a short while, just so you can get a sense of the shapes and everything, and if you're accurate. Another little trick you can do is you can take a photo. If you take a photo, you'll see you might start to see your painting in a different light again, which is very useful for accuracy. But you can see where I've painted around the arm just here, and around the face. You'll see me paint around that shortly, because I'm again looking at the shapes and everything of the face and everything else in order to start to improve the accuracy of the picture overall, as far as the shapes and things go. But now you can see that I've added more of the violet, and I'm using ultramarine blue and burnt umber to get the nice deep shadows in there as well. And this is the bit I wanted to get to, which is starting to add some very loosely again. So I'm still looking constantly at the photograph, and I'm thinking about the paintings I showed you earlier on this evening. The loose painterly marks in order to make the background seem further away, as in atmospheric perspective, and to help the man feel like he's closer to us and in the foreground and not merged in. I could do him a lot looser and it would still work very nicely, but we're going for the loose marks tonight on here. And now I'm adding, there's a little bit of perspective on this bar that he's leaning on, so I've added in a little bit of that. So now we've got his elbow on the side as well. You'll notice as well I'm using a lot of horizontal and vertical brush strokes on here. That's because a lot of the shapes are actually horizontal and vertical. Again, I'm following the tones and shadows that I can see in this picture, but only very loosely, so that we get this kind of effect of things being further away. Yeah, you know, it's good fun trying out this technique. It's, as I was saying during the class, I tend to do a lot of collage work and lino printing at the moment, so it's actually really really good fun for me to have the opportunity to paint in this way and on canvas. So yeah, so you'll see I'll finish this or carry on with this painting next week, and perhaps in the last week try something a little bit different out. You can see me now starting to put the reflections onto the bar, again very loosely, but I may go back and refine some of the details on the bar, such as there's a glass on there and things like that as well. So I'll probably refine that because it's actually closer to us. It's in the foreground or in that depth of field within the photograph. So the very foreground where the bar is, the bar comes right up towards us. That's actually quite blurry, isn't it? So that can be changed to fit what we're doing. All right, so I'll see you next week. Have a fantastic one, and keep painting.